Hello and welcome to my presentation all about the medieval keyed fiddle. Now I'm sure that many of you out there will have heard about the nyckelharpa, the Swedish keyed fiddle, and Sweden is definitely where it's at in terms of keyed fiddling. But there is a lot of backstory before we get to the modern three-row chromatic that we all know and love. So if you've never seen one of those before, you'll have to come to a gig where I'm not dressed like this, as I'm not going to be playing the nyckelharpa, the silver bassharpa, or even the kontrabassharpa today. So a little history about the two tunes that you've just heard. They were Magnushymnen and Claukamal. Back in the beginning of the 10th century, the Orkneys were ruled by two Norwegian cousins, the Earl Håkan and the Earl Magnus. And of course, they were bound to come to blows at some point, which they did. However, by the year 1116, they agreed to settle this quarrel of theirs. But Håkan broke the agreement, seized Magnus and executed him. It didn't take long for stories of miracles taking place at Magnus's graveside to spring up, and in the end he was made a saint. And in 1137 his nephew Earl Ragnvald founded a cathedral in his honour. Although the oldest manuscript containing Magnushymnen only dates back to 1280, it is likely that it was written for the inauguration in 1137. The second tune was Claukamal. Sometimes this song is also known as Ragnar Lodbrok's song, and recounts the time when he was out dragon slaying in Gautland, and how, when he is finally invited to Odin's hall, it will be because he has died happy in battle. I played these on the moraharpa, which I will talk about more later on, but for now I'll show you up close how this instrument in general works. This instrument has 3 bowed strings, currently tuned A, D, D. The middle string is the lowest string and is a drone string, so I always play that string and tip the bow to play either of the other melody strings on the other side. The bridge is flat enough and the bow loose enough that I can choose to play all 3 strings at once if I wanted to, and I generally do. Now for this reason, I often retune the bottom string to a G, giving me a different key centre and a bit more versatility. The pitch of the notes are changed by pressing a key, and these keys have got tangents on them. The tangents touch the side of the string, and that shortens the vibrating length and thus the note. Now a lot of research has been performed on the keyed fiddle, and I will put my cards on the table. The presentation I'm going to do today would not have been possible without the work done by Per-Ulf Almor. He has researched tirelessly over the years and published lots of books on the subject, and it is thanks to these books and his images that I am able to do this presentation. Despite all of Per-Ulf's research, we still don't know exactly when or how it came into being. So I'm going to start as far back as I can go. Onto the PowerPoint. Now, back in 1935, an excavation was made at the Handelsmannen site in Sigtuna near Stockholm, and certain items were found. One of these is the upper object in the image you can see in the screen share. It was labelled up as being a key for a keyed fiddle, put in a box and left forgotten in storage. It wasn't until the museum was moving site that this artefact came to light. The key had been found in an archaeological layer that was fairly reliably dated to the 13th century, which makes it the earliest reference we have to any kind of keyed fiddle. But can we be sure that this key is actually from a keyed fiddle? Taking a close look at the slide, the object at the bottom is from a modern nyckelharpa, and you can definitely see a similarity. You should ignore the hole in the modern key. That is to let tangents from lower rows through and wouldn't appear on a simple one-rowed instrument. The key was inspected by a maker and also one of the top nyckelharpa players and current CEO of the Erik Solstrom Institute, or Nyckelharpa HQ as I like to call it, and they seem to be pretty convinced of its provenance and likelihood of it being from a keyed fiddle. The next slide, please. The next representation we have of the keyed fiddle is on the island of Gotland in Skällinge Church, and this dates back to 1350 and is a tiny little carved stone statue in an entranceway. There's been much debate over the years as to whether this is indeed a keyed fiddle or not. But if you compare the fingers on the bow hand with the fingers next to the keys, they do seem to look like keys rather than very large fingers. Moving on from this stone statue brings us to the earliest painted iconography. The earliest painting we have of the nyckelharpa dates back to 1408 by Taddeo di Bartolo. It is an angel playing a keyed fiddle in the Cappella de Palazzo Pubblico, the chapel of the town hall in Siena in Italy. Taddeo was born in 1363 in Siena and died at the age of 59 in 1422. This image is one of 32 angels, each playing a different musical instrument. Because this is just a painting, we don't really know what it would have sounded like, but I have a best guess replica here. So let me play this for you. I'm going to play Agnello by Domenica da Piacenza and Amoroso by Giovanni Ambrosio. The principle on how this instrument works is the same as with the instrument I showed you earlier, in that you push a key and this pushes a tangent against the string. I'm going to lift the lid of this instrument to show you the internal workings. And I'd like to warn you that I am fully aware that these are modern fixings on the inside. This instrument wasn't made to be authentically constructed, but in order to investigate how the music of the time might have been playable on an instrument with the numbers of keys and strings showed in the painting. I believe this to be more accurate than many other versions of the Siena harpa that I have seen on the continent. So, with that warning in place, if we lift the lid, you can see the instrument has 6 keys, and on each key there are 3 tangents. This means that each key press changes the pitch on 3 strings. Now from the painting it looks like you can't get very many notes, but by having more than one tangent on each key, you can get a range of over an octave. Now when I received this instrument, it had tangents on all 4 strings and was tuned exactly like a violin, and it made it pretty impossible to play. So by taking the tangents off one string and swapping the lowest string into the middle, I was able to convert it into a drone instrument. So I'm always harmonizing against this drone playing on either side, the melody strings on either side. And suddenly, not only was this instrument playable, but it made sense of the instrument in the painting only having a limited number of keys. In Tadeo's painting, there are 5 keys and probably 4 bowed strings. And this isn't the only painting with so few keys on it. So the only way for this and the other paintings to be playable and versatile instruments is for it to be what we nyckelharpa players call in contra, i.e. more than one tangent on each key and melody strings on either side of the drone string in contra, like contraflow. I have been aware of discussions surrounding the sister instrument to this one here, and it is true. My keybox cover does not go to the end of the instrument, but many of the instruments that I have seen with the correct keybox cover have a modern 3-row chromatic mechanism underneath the lid. So this means that this instrument can play music in an authentic way rather than just being a modern 3-row dressed up to look like a Siena harpa. Going back to the painting, we can't be sure why Tadeo drew this angel, and more specifically, why this angel was playing the keyed fiddle. But I've done some research and I have discovered this. A long day, and Tadeo was tired. All day he'd been entertaining the customers in his father's barbershop playing music. He did enjoy playing, but all he really wanted to do was draw. Even now he was doodling on a piece of paper when suddenly a stranger walked in. He was tall and his tunic was the darkest black that Tadeo had ever seen. And for all it was black cloth, it seemed to glow, and the matching chaperon had the longest, floppiest liripipe he had ever seen. Tadeo knew at once that this stranger could only be the devil. "Hello," said Tadeo hesitantly. "How may I help you? My father isn't here right now, and we're closed." The stranger looked Tadeo straight in the eyes. "It is you I wanted to see. I know that you harbour thoughts of being a great artist, and I can help you. I would make a wager with you. I will make you one of the greatest artists of your time. You will paint frescoes in some of the country's most prestigious palaces. The Cathedral at Pisa, the Palazzo Pubblico, the Duomo of Santa Maria dell'Assunta at Montepulciano. Your work will travel around the world long after your death. The price? The price is your soul, unless..." The stranger looked at the satola in Tadeo's hand. "Unless you can present to me a musical instrument that I have never seen before. I will come back and visit you on this day 25 years from now to claim my prize, your soul." Tadeo looked stunned, thought quickly for a moment. 25 years? That's a lifetime. I can surely find a musical instrument that is so obscure and pointless that even the devil has never seen it. "Yes," said Tadeo, "you have your wager. In exchange for being one of the world's greatest painters, either I find you a musical instrument you have never seen before, or you get my soul. Deal." The devil smiled and in the blink of an eye vanished. The devil was true to his word. Within the space of 4 years, Tadeo was painting great works of art, had entered the Sienese Guild of Artists, had become a master painter, and was painting frescoes in all the greatest chapels. Tadeo never forgot his roots though, and would often go back home to his father's barber shop to entertain the customers. Many people would stop by on their journeys, and he would exchange songs and tales and drink ale until late into the night. His wager with the devil, because if he hadn't, he would have been aware that an awful lot of minstrels and troubadours seemed to stop by his father's barber shop carrying an amazing array of instruments, and he might just have paid more attention to these angelic-like creatures. Many, many years passed, and Tadeo spent his days painting and painting, until one day, exactly 24 years after his meeting with the devil, he suddenly woke up in bed one night in a terrible sweat. The wager. He'd completely forgotten about the wager. He'd pushed it to the back of his mind and forgotten all about it. He jumped out of bed and paced up and down. What was it that the devil had wanted? A musical instrument that he'd never seen before. He was never going to be able to find an instrument to present to the devil in time. Then suddenly, a plan came to him. What if he painted this instrument? If he painted it on the ceiling of the chapel of the Palazzo Pubblico, then the devil wouldn't be able to enter the chapel and inspect the instrument. And if it was being played by an angel, then surely the devil would never know it wasn't real. Tadeo spent the following 12 months painting and painting the ceiling in the chapel. Just to make sure, he decided he would paint as many angels as possible, each playing a different musical instrument. He just had to hope that one of these 32 would be obscure enough that even the devil had never heard of it. And so it was that in 1408, exactly 25 years after having made his wager with the devil, Tadeo was stood in the middle of the Cappella de Palazzo Pubblico. And suddenly there was a gust of wind, and he could see a shadowy figure standing in the entrance doorway. Tadeo di Bartolo, today is the day that I claim my prize, your soul, unless, that is, you have managed to find me a musical instrument I have never seen before. Well, Tadeo stood frozen to the spot and pointed to the angel closest to him. A minstrel playing a portative organ? That's nothing. Tadeo pointed again. Cymbals, a shawm, a lute, a lyre, an aulos, a hurdy-gurdy. Please, even a child would know about these instruments. One by one, Tadeo pointed out each of the angels until there was only one left. This was the final angel that Tadeo had painted, almost as an afterthought. At the last minute, he had recalled a particular drunken evening back in his father's barber shop. Now that he thought about it, there had been a lot of minstrels playing weird and wonderful instruments passing through that shop, but there had been one that had caught his eye, and it was this angel that he now pointed at. The angel, dressed in a peach tunic, long golden hair, was holding an instrument not dissimilar to a viol, but was held across the chest, and to change the notes, a key was pressed. Today I wasn't sure how, or if it worked, or even if this instrument had really been at his father's barber shop, but he had painted it, and now, with a trembling finger, was pointing to it. The devil suddenly stopped his taunts and stared from the doorway at what he assumed was a minstrel playing the most unusual instrument he had ever seen, in fact, never seen before. With wide eyes, he tore his gaze away and looked Taddeo full in the face. "You win. Your soul is yours to keep." Just like that, he vanished. This painting is still in the Cappella de Palazzo Pubblico, and you can go and gaze at this instrument, and the chances are that you too will remember the first time you ever saw your first keyed fiddle. The next painting of a keyed fiddle is also found in Italy. It is a tiny little painting in a little medieval book found in the town of Ferrara in Italy in 1445 by the painter Giraldi Guglielmo. It was found by the famous nyckelharpa player Marco Ambrosini and sent to Per Ulf to include in his research. We know that Guglielmo was active in Ferrara in 1445 to 1489, and something that is interesting to note, but that we can form no conclusion from, is that Ambrosio and Piacenza were both in Ferrara at the same time as Guglielmo. So could it be possible that I am not the first person to play those two tunes on an Italian keyed fiddle? As you can see, the body of the instrument here has the same box shape of a symphony. Now there is no bow in this image, so I have to take on faith Marco and Per Ulf's research for this image. Next slide, please. We now leave Italy and head north to Emeslöv in Sweden, 1460. This keyed fiddle was painted by Nils Håkansson, who, as a lay brother, was also known as Nicolaus Hakvini. Very little is known about Nils or why he painted this angel. The instrument itself isn't far removed from the Siena harpa version. It has 7 keys and no keybox cover at all. 1468. Överlövsta, Uppland, still in Sweden. This painting is attributed to Andreas Eriksson and had been chalked over in 1664 and was restored in 1914. It is hard to see the detail, but up close it is just possible to make out the keys. Now, 1470 in Sånga in Uppland. As with the previous painting, this is also attributed to Andreas Eriksson, and in 1687 had also been chalked over. It was restored in 1902. It's also hard to see the detail, but the keys are most definitely there. Next image. 1475, Häverö in Uppland. Uppland is just north of Stockholm, about sort of an hour or so's drive north of Stockholm. The two images here are interesting. This angel, like the others, had been chalked over and subsequently restored. The picture on the right is the image post-restoration, the date of which I couldn't find. The picture on the left was a watercolour painted by the architect Friedrich Wilhelm Skolander in 1875, and it is said to be a painting of the angel before it was restored. Now, there are some major differences in between the two. The current image has a keybox lid, whereas the watercolour does not. Now, Per Ulf postulates that the watercolour represents what was present pre-restoration. But I would say that the watercolour doesn't say anything completely conclusive, as the architect could well have been aware of nyckelharpas of his day and merely painted one of those, and it does look very much like a kontrabasharpa. The restored version, in my opinion, does look more consistent with contemporaneous images from the 1400s, so I don't think anything can be concluded from the difference in the image. Let's take a break from the PowerPoint. Here are two well-known tunes, Libaeus Distonis from the 15th century Gresley manuscript and Petit Rien by Giovanni Ambrosio. Back to the PowerPoint. Now in 1490, Skuttunga, Uppland, still in Sweden, here we have a tiny little wooden carving. It might be difficult to see, but there are notches to the side of the fingerboard and below the level of the keybox cover that represents keys. It's a tiny, tiny little carving on the altar surrounding Mary. 1498, Laga in Uppland. Now this painting was by Albertus Pictor. Pictor was a German-born painter, 1440 to 1507, that was active in Sweden around 1465. There are 37 churches in Sweden with his artwork, mostly in the Uppland region, but this is his only keyed fiddler. Next we go down to Denmark, to Vindeslev in 1500. And as with many of the paintings, this was covered over in 1886 and restored in 1913. Whether or not this is a keyed fiddle or not is debatable, as it seems to go straight from tuning pegs to body, so who knows. 1503, Älvkarleby in Uppland. This painting is attributed to the painter called Egil. Egil and Andreas Eriksson both belong to the Tierps school of medieval painting, which is right in the heart of Uppland. The village of Älvkarleby is a place of pilgrimage for many nyckelharpa players, as it was the place that the greatest nyckelharpa player that ever lived came from. As he wasn't born until 1783, it doesn't feature in this presentation, but it does help to show how important this region is. This angel has an instrument with 8 keys and 3 strings. Now this is a prime candidate for being a contra with a drone string in the middle, but unfortunately no tangents are shown. In fact, no tangents are ever shown, so we won't ever know. 1503, Tolfta in Uppland. This painting is also attributed to the group of painters surrounding Egil and the Tierps school of painting. This instrument has 4 strings and 8 keys and still no visible tangents. 1504, Tegelsmora in Uppland. Now this painting is attributed to Erik Östensson and is the late Tierps school of painting style, and you can see it really is quite a different style here. So, time for some more music. Visin, Visin, Visin from Florence around 1490 and Jealousy by Domenico. presentation is now becoming a little bit death by PowerPoint, and we are also heading out of the 1400s, so I will flick through these final images relatively quickly. Helsingjörs, down in Denmark, 1511, keyed fiddler. Alnö in Gamla kyrka, which means old church in Middelpart. This is 1520. Looks quite like this instrument I'm holding here. Rasboskill, back up in Uppland, 1520. Very odd-looking character. And then finally, this brings us on to the earliest actual instrument, at least the earliest potential actual instrument. This is called the nyckelharpa and is so called because it was found in the town of Mora in Sweden. It's currently in the Anders Zorn Museum, kept safely under lock and key. It's not actually playable, but it has been measured up and recreated as a playable instrument. As you saw earlier, I have one here. The original instrument only had one row of keys and two drone strings. There are several different combinations amongst those of us that play this instrument. One row, two rows like this one, and also in contra. It's time for some more cantigas, number 140 and number 42. The date of the nyckelharpa is purported to be 1526, and it has that date written on the back of the neck. And carbon dating puts this as being accurate. However, there has been research done that possibly suggests that the instrument itself was just repurposed wood. There are also stories which mention this instrument. And when you look for the historical facts, it looks like the stories take place in the 1680s, which would mean that this instrument is much younger than 1526. But although there was an instrument named in these stories, there is no evidence to state that it was that actual instrument. Or it could be that the instrument was over 100 years old by the time it was played at these events. Just because an instrument can be dated to 1526 doesn't mean that it can't have been played at a wedding in 1680, and conversely, just because a story has been attached to an instrument, it doesn't mean to say it really was that actual instrument. So I'd say that this remains inconclusive. There are 4 images left that I want to briefly mention. Back to the PowerPoint. Martin Agricola, in his Musica Instrumentalis in Germany in 1528, we have this keyed fiddle. 1528, Hildesheim in Germany. This picture is from the inside of a reconstructed building in Germany. The building was burnt down and then reconstructed from photographs in the 80s, and it was at that time that this cherub was discovered. 1565 in Rinkeby in Denmark. These 2 paintings, found in a church, has instruments with features that we've encountered before. A tuning peg area looking quite like the Siena harpa, and also heart-shaped sound holes like the nyckelharpa. And finally, well past the 1400s remit, we reach Pretorius's Musica Syntagmum. This image is the one that has been postulated that the nyckelharpa was a copy of, thus invalidating the date of the nyckelharpa. I suspect that we shall never know, but as a storyteller myself, I suspect that the origins of the nyckelharpa will be forever lost in the mists of time. I do, of course, have a story as to why Pretorius's instrument has heart-shaped sound holes, but we are already well beyond the medieval period, and that will have to wait for another day. My final slide is of 2 maps showing the locations of all of these images, and you can see how close together most of the Swedish images are in that small region of Uppland. I'd like to finish this presentation with a final set of cantigas.
Ser mot andra, och så vägen